The time has come for a new revolution. Not a revolution of violence or control, but a revolution of the mind, the heart, and the soul. A revolution that will touch the hearts of men to let them know that they no longer have to pretend. This is a place where men get to be real, because in this space they can say exactly what they feel. So men of all races unite and come in. This journey will challenge you to look deep within. So now, let the new revolution begin, because it's time for a new conversation with men. Welcome to a new conversation with men, where our intention is to empower men to live extraordinary lives. I'm your host, Coach Michael Taylor, and joining me is my good friend and co-host, Arthur J. Johnson. How you doing, Arthur?
Hey, Mike. How you doing? It's a pleasure to be here.
All right. Today we're going to be talking about one of my favorite topics, and that is being an entrepreneur. And so my question to you, the listening audience, have you ever considered that you may have within you everything you need to become an entrepreneur? You see, I believe that there has never been a better time than right now if you've even thought about wanting to own your own business. The time is right. So if you've been thinking about this possibility, well, this show is for you. What we're going to be sharing are 10 things that every entrepreneur must do if he wants to be successful in business. Because, you know, there's a question that's been thrown around for a very long time, which is, or are entrepreneurs born, or are they made? Well, for me, I believe it's both. I think some entrepreneurs are born, it's just in them, and some entrepreneurs are thrust into that position and do some amazing things with what they have. So, I don't think it's an either or. The question is, do you have what it takes to be an entrepreneur? That's the real question. Do you have what it takes to be an entrepreneur? And so, Arthur, we're going to be talking about this today. And as an entrepreneur,
Yes.
I want to begin by asking you some very basic questions.
Okay.
When did you first realize that you wanted to be an entrepreneur?
Well, Mike, I realized I wanted to be an entrepreneur while I was in corporate America, believe it or not. I was the CFO of a hospital there in Houston, Texas, and I had a desire and a drive to develop people and to share this message of being, doing, and having the very best that you could be. So I was doing this in addition to being a CFO, and you can imagine what comes with being a CFO, 14 hours, 16 hours, and the BlackBerry, as I would call the corporate handcuffs. So I had all of that, but there was just this innate desire to want to have my own company, to have my own organization, to have my own consulting practice. So that continued to feed on the inside of me until I got full of it. And once I got full of it, I was thrust into this new realm that we call entrepreneurship. I call it a new realm. It's 6 years later that we are still in this new realm. But yes, I consider myself an entrepreneur, and it was because I had this drive on the inside to express in a greater fashion and to have my own company.
You know, it's interesting because for me, when I was 10 years old, I remember this as though it were yesterday. I walked up to my grandfather and I said, "Grandpa, you know what? When I grow up, I'm going to own my own company." And he looked at me, kind of smiled. He goes, "I think you can do that." I said, "Yeah." And so at a very early age, there was a part of me that knew that that's what I was supposed to be doing. And so I started my first company when I was 13 years old. I didn't know it was a company at the time,
Right.
but what happened was I convinced the owner of a motorcycle shop to hire me to clean up his garage.
Wow. Okay.
And so I went in and I told the guy, I said, "Look, I'm ready to work for you, because I noticed that there's a lot of stuff around here that I could be doing for you and you wouldn't have to worry about it." And he was so impressed with my initiative that he says, "Okay," so he says, "How much is this going to cost me?"
Okay.
I didn't even know what to say. I said, "Look, here's what I'll do. I'll clean your garage and you pay me what you think it's worth." He said, okay, that's a no-lose proposition. So at 13 years of age, I went into this thing and I cleaned that garage that you can almost eat off the floors.
Wow.
And the guy was so impressed. Number one, the minimum wage back then I think was $1.62 an hour. Okay? He said, I'll give you $5 an hour. And I worked for 2 hours, generally 3 days a week. But I did such a great job. He contacted some of his friends that had garages. Before I knew it, I had 3 other clients that I was cleaning their garages. So, in answer to the question, are entrepreneurs born or made? Well, for me, I know I was born to be an entrepreneur. It's just in me. It's something that I have to do. You know, and so as a speaker, as an author, as now a television host, I mean, these are just things I do as an expression of my entrepreneurial spirit.
Right.
So today we're going to be talking about some ideas that can help you if you've been thinking about becoming an entrepreneur. We want to share some things that I think every entrepreneur should understand and know. But before we do that, Arthur, I want to talk to you from the standpoint of being an entrepreneur. Now, you wear many hats.
Yes.
And so your company, tell us a little bit about it.
Yes, my company is Vision Inspired Performance Group International, and we're a performance and consulting company that deals in the areas of leadership and peak performance development training. And we accomplish that by consulting, by speaking, as well as holding workshops and seminars for our client organizations. So in essence, we're able to go into an organization to identify what their training needs are, what the growth opportunities are, and be able to tailor training packages in order to assist them. And then we also provide keynote speaking services as well from the standpoint of symposiums or conferences that companies are having. We're able to go in and provide those services as well.
And so now you mentioned that you were CEO of a hospital.
Yes, CFO.
CFO, I'm sorry, CFO, which for the people who don't know, what is that?
That's a Chief Financial Officer.
Chief Financial Officer. So your responsibility was to take care of the money?
That's correct.
Is that how that works?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. So you went from taking care of somebody else's money to do your own thing so you can take care of your money.
Right.
Now, I know that there are some people who are watching this who may be in that job that they don't really feel fulfilled. Maybe they've got the money, they've got the title, but there's something in them that's saying, I could do something on my own. What tips would you give that person that's watching this show right now, that's in that place where there's something gnawing away at them that's saying, you know, you should really do your own thing? What advice would you give to that person?
Yes, Michael, that's a perfect question because I coach individuals that are in that same space. And that's a very key question because some individuals get the urge and they jump before they're ready. They jump before they're ready. And what I mean by that is that they've not really put the financial resources in place in order to sustain them until the new business, the new entrepreneurial endeavor is able to sustain itself. So the first point I would make is that if you're in a job and you desire to do your own thing, stay in your job until you're prepared to move from your job to your entrepreneurial experience. And in addition to that, the second thing that I would say is to look to see where you can start doing what it is you desire to do right where you are, while you're still employed on your full-time job. Is it a service that you can provide after hours, off hours, or in a fashion that you would take time off from your full-time job so that you can easily transition into the entrepreneurial experience? Because what I would share with individuals is that once you cross over, it's now up to you. The old notion, if it's to be, it's up to me. And as I love to say, well, if I don't slay any chickens, there are no eggs. You know, if I don't get the pig, there is no bacon, so forth and so on. So what that simply means is that if I am not out doing what I do, there is no money coming in. So that can sometimes become a detriment if you're not financially prepared to sustain yourself until the entrepreneurial opportunity takes wings. And that just lets us know, how bad do you really want it?
Yes. And boy, I have to piggyback on that, because that is such good advice. Because I personally have this vision of creating my own publishing company.
Okay.
I have a passion for books. I love writing. And so for me, that goal, that dream, has been stirring inside of me for 13 years. And I've been holding on to that dream. But I haven't put together the financial resources just yet to jump out there 100%. So yes, I currently have a 9-to-5. So if you're thinking about becoming an entrepreneur, know that sometimes you're going to have to make some sacrifices.
Right.
And so for me, you know, I have this goal that I want to just jump out there and start doing this. But what I've come to know is that I want to make sure that I do it responsibly.
Right. Good word.
And the way to do it responsibly is, first of all, do all my research. Put all my ducks in a row, if you will, so that, as you mentioned, when I get ready to jump, I've got everything in place that's going to move me in the direction that I want to go. And so I know that for a while there was a time when I felt that as an entrepreneur, I need to be able to give 100%. So I can't give 100% if I'm working for somebody else. Now see, I did that some 15 years ago.
Okay.
In a business venture where I had this awesome idea. I was going to make all this money. And I walked away from my very secure job, chasing this dream. Well, the truth was, I didn't have enough information and knowledge to do that. The good news is, I was willing to take the risk. Okay, so I want you to hear that. You want to be able to take risk, but what you want to do is minimize the risk.
Right.
And so, as you're thinking about becoming an entrepreneur, as you're sitting there and these ideas are churning inside of you, you got to be rational. And the one thing that I always say is that no matter what happens, if you don't have income coming in from some source, it's not a good idea to jump right into something.
Exactly.
You've got to have some source of income to help sustain you. For example, right now, I work my 9-to-5. And it is income that's coming in on a regular basis. So I'm not stressing out about money. The good news is I get to be a little more creative because I don't have to worry about whether or not my bills are going to get paid.
Right.
And so ultimately that goal of creating $1 million enterprise is still there. It's what's driving me, but I'm taking the necessary steps to lay the foundation to make sure that when it does launch, then I'm ready to go.
Absolutely wonderful advice, Mike, because you can utilize your 9-to-5 to feed the dream.
Absolutely.
But when you jump out there without that source of income coming in, the dream can quickly become a nightmare.
Absolutely.
It really
yes.
can.
Yes.
And you could end up being very frustrated and end up giving up on the dream in totality when that really was not necessarily needed. It was just that you jumped prematurely. So I think to sum up the advice there would definitely be to stay where you are, to understand how, as I love you said, to be creative, how you can be creative and still express your gifts, your talents, your ideas in your entrepreneurial adventure or venture until you're able to fully transition into it. So you work on your part-time until it becomes full-time.
There you go.
So you work on the dream until it actually becomes a dream that you're actually able to live on a daily basis and it's able to sustain your livelihood. Because I've coached and counseled individuals that did just that. And it does not make for a happy situation for that individual as well as those that are connected to those individuals.
Yes, and so we must understand that it does not take away from the dream to maintain something other than the dream. Because, as mentioned, I used to have this feeling that, oh my gosh, if I'm really committed to being an entrepreneur, then I got to be an entrepreneur, 100%. I got to jump in there. Well, don't jump so quickly, because if you look at the failure rate of businesses that start, it's pretty high. And so what we want to do is we want to help you minimize that if you have that bug, that entrepreneurial bug inside of you. So it's a perfect segue into the first key that we want to share that I think every entrepreneur must understand. And that is this. Here's the first key. The primary goal of starting a business is to provide a product or a service. You got to understand this very basic principle. Because a lot of people, they're sitting there, they hate their jobs, they're miserable, and they're thinking, well, if I just start a business, I'll be happy. It doesn't work that way. The first thing you have to understand is, as an entrepreneur, you're going to provide either a product or a service. It's that simple. So if you don't have a product or a service that you're ready to bring to market, you're really not ready to be an entrepreneur. Okay? So you want to make sure that once you understand that, then the next thing you have to figure out is how you can get customers to buy your product or your service. That's the fundamental principle of being an entrepreneur, providing a product and a service and finding people that are willing to pay for that product or service.
Yes, and I agree wholeheartedly, Michael, because there's a big difference between a hobby and a business.
Yes.
And I found that individuals are wanting to jump out in what they call a business, but yet it's still a hobby. And as you said, a product or a service is key, and then finding customers who, who need that product or service. And that's the only point that you truly have a viable business transaction that can take place. We have a need, we have a product or service in order to meet that need. And if we're not actively engaged in that, we just perhaps are still engaged in a glorified hobby, which that's good, but we just have to know that there's a difference between having a hobby and having a business.
Yes, and a hobby can turn into a business. So if you're doing, excuse me, if you're doing what you love, that's awesome. But what you love has to produce a product or a service. Now, once you have one of those or both of those in place, then you have to make the commitment to gaining the knowledge to bringing that product or service to market.
Right.
And that's what a lot of hobbyists, I think that's where they mess up. It's because they think, well, I'm great at baking these cookies. And I know that everybody's going to love my cookies. And they're really good cookies, but they don't understand marketing. They don't understand bookkeeping. They don't understand the basics of entrepreneurship, and that's why so many businesses fail. So let's go to number 2. If you want to be an entrepreneur, you must be willing to take risk. Now, we talked about creating a hobby or taking a hobby and turning it into a business, which is a risk in a sense that you have this idea, you're sitting up and you know that you can do this, whatever that is, and you know that people will pay for whatever that is. But the risk is still, if I take all of my money and put it into this thing, what if nobody buys it? Right?
Right.
Because we always think whatever we have is the right thing that everybody's going to want. Unfortunately, it doesn't always work that way. But as an entrepreneur, the beauty of it is you're willing to sometimes take those risks to bring those products or services to market. And what will happen is, in a lot of cases, you will be rewarded for taking the risk. So the question becomes, are you a risk taker? Are you willing to listen to that still small voice in you that knows what you're capable of? Or are you going to listen to all the naysayers out there that are saying, oh no, 80% of businesses fail? So be willing to take risks.
Yes, Mike, and it aligns itself with something you said earlier about doing your research. And I believe with doing your research and taking risk, I promote what I call calculated risk. Calculated risk, meaning that you have done the necessary research and you understand what's required in order to execute on this idea, to execute on this entrepreneurial business, and based on that, you now move forward with that. I think that's the difference between just taking a risk, because we're not saying to just do something blindly. I think the biggest thing we can understand in business is that there are true numbers that drive business. It's not a hokey type experience. You have fundamentals that drive business. So you assess those fundamentals and determine, do I move or do I not move? And then that's where the calculation part comes in, but not removed from the research that has been done. So you research and then you act on the research, and some would call that risk. But here at A New Conversation with Men, we would call that a calculated risk.
Yes.
So you move on known information.
Absolutely. So let's jump to number 3. As an entrepreneur, it's important that you get really comfortable talking about money. Now, as simplistic as that sounds, a lot of people haven't really thought about it, because we primarily focus our attention on, I have this thing that I want to sell, I want to make money from it, and that's how I grow my business. But in talking about money, or shall I say getting comfortable talking about money, it's really a matter of being willing to say, maybe I don't know enough about money, and that's why my business is going to work. For example, if I don't know how to keep my books and take notes or understand my profit and loss, and I'm not talking about it, my business is going to fail.
Sure.
So you have to be willing to get comfortable talking about money, good or bad. You know, for me, I have big dreams. Big dreams. See, I think in terms of billions. That's just how my little mind works. I think in terms of billions, and I'm really comfortable talking in those numbers, because to me it's just numbers. But when you want to get clear on being comfortable with saying, I need money to help fund my business, or I need to talk to someone because my business is losing money. See, people shut down sometimes because they're ashamed that they're a failure. And so my point here is that I want you to get comfortable talking about all aspects of money and how that applies to your business.
Yes, I agree wholeheartedly, Mike, because we cannot do business or be in business without the circulation of money, the circulation of currency. So this is something that we have to definitely become comfortable with. Outside of that, it goes back to what we're talking about, it just being a hobby. But you're in business to make a profit, and you have to truly understand what's driving your products, what's driving your services, and what's going to create a profit and what's going to create a loss, and then dealing with your vendors and your bankers and so forth. This is something that you have to definitely be comfortable with, as well as projecting the future vision you have for your business.
Yes.
And I love that you're talking billions. As,
with a B.
Yes, we would say.
With a B.
If you have to think, you might as well think big.
Absolutely.
You shoot for the moon, and if you miss it, perhaps you're amongst the stars. So that is definitely something that one has to be comfortable with, talking about money.
Absolutely. So number 4, as an entrepreneur, you have to learn how to say no. Now, as simplistic as that sounds, a lot of people aren't comfortable setting boundaries. As an entrepreneur, you have to set boundaries. For example, you have a business that you're starting, and you've got your cousin over here that says, you know what, can you give me, you know, some of your product without paying for it? Well, there's a time when you have to say, no, you pay for that. Okay? So being able to say no is a very important part of running a business, because you will have, unfortunately sometimes, unscrupulous people who may try to take advantage of you if you're not careful. So being able to say no is an important part of your success.
Yes, and when we say no, that opens us up to say yes to something else. And too many times we're saying no, we're not saying no, we're just saying yes, yes, and yes. And unfortunately, the business suffers for that. And you gave the prime example of those perhaps closest to you wanting a freebie, or wanting a favor, or wanting a handout. Once again, it's not a hobby. It's a business, and you have to respect it as a business and treat it as a business. And if you do that, I believe everybody else will as well.
Yes. So make sure that you're comfortable setting boundaries and saying no as an entrepreneur. Number 5, and this is something that it can either sink you or help you float. And that is, you must be able to take and sometimes filter criticism. Because people on the outside can't see your vision. Only you can really see your vision. So it's important that when the doomsayers come up and all the negative people come up and say, man, you're crazy for trying that. Why do you want to do that? Don't you know how many businesses fail? Well, don't take it personally. Recognize that they can't see your vision. And so you also have to be willing to take the criticism that you may need to support you in your business. Because if someone comes up to you and tells you, you know what, you make good cookies, right? But you make terrible muffins. Your muffins taste nasty. Now, you may get offended that somebody told you that your muffins don't taste good, but guess what? What if that's your customer? And he's giving you criticism that can help you. So you have to be able to take that criticism and not take it personally, but take it as feedback. Feedback that says, well, maybe I need to look at how I'm making my muffins. Maybe I need to change something about my muffins. So it's important that you are able to take and filter criticism.
Yes, Mike, and I would say definitely take constructive criticism and create something constructive out of it. Leave the destructive criticism so that it don't destroy you.
Yeah. And so that's an important part, because as mentioned, you're going to have people that love you and care about you, and they're giving you their opinions. That's all it is, their opinions. So don't take it personally. Take it as either constructive or destructive criticism, and use it to move your business forward. Right. So let's go to number 6. And this is a big one for men, because I believe that the 3 most difficult words for most men to say is, I need help. That's just the way men are wired. No. Let me rephrase that. That's not how we're wired. That's how we're conditioned in our culture.
Good.
That men don't know how to ask for help. And so what I want you to do is, this tip number 6, is I want you to swallow your pride, get your ego out of the way, and be open to saying, I need help. Because you will need help at times. And you have to have those support systems in place that can support you at the times when you need help. But unfortunately, for too many of us as men, we aren't willing to say, I need help.
Yes, and I agree. And definitely being an entrepreneur, sometimes you are a solopreneur. You're doing it by yourself.
Yes.
That's a grand thing, because there are experiences in enterprises that are set up where one person can do it, but you cannot do it alone. You cannot do it by yourself. You may be in business by yourself, but you cannot do it by yourself, meaning that you need the collective help of others. And it's okay to ask for help. I mean, if I were sinking, I would rather cry for help than to engulf pride and sink at the same time.
Yes. So know that it's absolutely okay to ask for help, and know that there's going to come lots and lots of opportunities for you to do so. So swallow your pride. It doesn't make you less of a man to say, I need help. Okay? Number 7. So if you want to be an entrepreneur, and this, because of technology today, I believe is mandatory. And that is, you have to get comfortable being on stage. You got to be comfortable sharing your message, your vision, your company with others. And so that doesn't mean that you have to become a TV host. It doesn't mean that you have to be a motivational speaker per se. But you must be able to share your vision with others. a great way to do that is by doing video, by being on camera, getting comfortable sharing what it is that you want to put out there, be it a product or a service. So it's imperative that as an entrepreneur, you get comfortable making presentations, because there may come a time when you need to borrow some money. And so you want to come across as confident in what you're doing and what you're asking for. And having great communication skills is an important aspect of possibly winning over an investor or someone who may be interested in what you're doing.
Sure. Without a doubt, you know, in business we have the old 60-second elevator speech.
Yes.
Right? So you're going to share briefly about you, your business, what you do in 60 seconds. And even that experience, you're always on stage. So whether you're in front of a camera or whether you're in front of the mirror, you're always on stage when you're talking about you and your business and your vision. So you definitely want to get comfortable with that, because as you share that, you now allow people to buy into what you've actually shared. But you have to be able to communicate it in such a way that people can believe what it is you've shared and can buy into the vision that you projected to them.
Yes, absolutely. So let's go ahead and jump to number 8. And that is, you must manage your most valuable resource, which is your time. You see, it's easy to get distracted, especially today. Facebook, internet, cell phones. It's easy to get distracted. So it's important that you pay attention to how you're using your time and make sure that you're really focusing on what's really important versus the things that you may just think you need to be doing. So if you're going to be an entrepreneur, one thing you will have to learn how to do is how to manage your time.
Yes, Mike, and I found this out some time ago. I believe that we really cannot manage our time. I believe the time takes care of itself. We have to manage our activity in the span of time.
Okay, I like that.
Because we have to make sure that we're doing the right thing at the right time in the right way. Because it's not just the number of hours you put in, but it's the effort that you put into the hours, which is the activity that's being done. Because we can spend a lot of time, but really not have anything to show for it at the end of the time. So once again, it's not the time, because everybody's given 24 hours.
Absolutely.
But we have a variety of different products that are created from that time. So it's about the activity.
Like that. Like that. Great distinction there. And so as we move to number 9, is as an entrepreneur, you've got to learn how to make really tough decisions. And a lot of people struggle with decision making. But if you're going to be an entrepreneur, you've got to have, first and foremost, I believe, you've got to have the vision first. What is it that you want to create? Once you know that, then you've got to make all the decisions to help you get there. And so if you're not comfortable making tough decisions, then my suggestion, make sure you have mentors that you can go to that can support you in making those tough decisions.
And I agree, Mike, because everything hinges on our decisions. It's like the hinges that hang a door, where our destiny hangs on the decisions that we make. And if we're not able to make decisions, our destiny will get hung up.
Ooh, I like that.
Thank you. That's a good one. Okay.
That's a good one.
Yeah, that one just came to me, Mike.
That's a good one. And last but not least, this is something that every entrepreneur must do. And that is be willing to learn new skills quickly. Now, there's a gentleman by the name of Alvin Toffler who said this. He said, the functional illiterate of the 21st century will not be those who cannot read or write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn.
Beautiful.
In our information and technology-driven society, that's the key to success. Learn, unlearn, relearn. It's constant movement, constant motion. So we as entrepreneurs have to be willing to gain that skill set, because everything changes so rapidly. And so if we want to keep up with some of those things, what we have to be willing to do is know that we have the capacity to do that. But then we have to be willing to stretch ourselves to make sure that we're constantly learning new things.
Yes, indeed, and I believe that skills are the real deal, and that's what makes success possible.
Yes.
It's the skills. We can have a lot of everything else, but if we don't have the right skill set, and if we're not proficient in those skills, our progress and success tends to stutter. It just meanders back and forth.
Sure. Sure. So there you have them. 10 keys that I just want you to think about. If you've been having that entrepreneurial spirit moving inside of you, saying, you know, I think I could own my business. I think I could run my own business. I hope these 10 keys have inspired you to think about some things. Because what I know is that if you are able to have the vision of creating a company, you have the capacity to create the company. You see, Deepak Chopra said this, and I think it's very powerful. He said, inherent in every intention and desire is the mechanics for its fulfillment. In other words, you can't even have a dream without the mechanics to make it happen.
Right.
I love that. So I want you to think about that. If you're dreaming about being an entrepreneur, you have everything inside of you right now to become that entrepreneur.
Awesome.
Oh, I like that.
Awesome.
I like that.
Yes.
So this has been another episode of A New Conversation with me and Arthur. I just want to say thank you again for sharing your wisdom with us. It is always a pleasure and an honor to have you here. And I want to give you an opportunity to give any closing thoughts you may have to the audience.
Well, Michael, once again, I thank you for having me here on A New Conversation with Men and to be able to share with your audience. Once again, it is always exciting and dynamic to come and share with you and to be able to glean wisdom from you as you seek to share with your audience. So I am definitely thankful and grateful for being here.
And I'm grateful to have you on my team. I got to tell you that. So I want to close with this. You have within you the capacity to live an extraordinary life. Don't just be ordinary. Be extraordinary. It's in you. So remember, it's there. You've got to be willing to grab it, hold on to it, and do whatever it takes to bring your dream to reality, because it's already waiting for you. You just have to catch up to it. This has been A New Conversation with Men. I'm your host, Coach Michael Taylor. We'll see you next week.